The moment my son closed the door behind me, I knew my world had just changed forever. I stood there on the porch, clutching two old suitcases and a box of keepsakes, wondering how a lifetime of sacrifice could be reduced to a few bags and a curt goodbye. My name is Helen Carter. I was 58 years old the day my son Michael told me I no longer had a place in his home. To understand how deep that cut went, you need to know something about me. I raised Michael on my own after his father was killed in a dockyard accident when Michael was 10. There were nights when I worked 3 jobs, waitressing at the diner, scrubbing offices at night, and baking cakes for neighbors on weekends, just to make sure my boy had everything he needed. I used to tell myself the struggle would be worth it when he grew into a man who remembered where he came from. After decades of scraping by, I thought I could finally rest when I moved in with Michael and his wife Clara. I had just lost my small catering job, the last steady income I had, and with no savings and a broken heart, I thought family would be my safety net. For 3 months, I poured myself into that household, cooking, cleaning, watching the kids so Clara could focus on her office job. I woke up early to make their breakfast, packed lunches with handwritten notes for the children, and tucked them in with stories at night. But somewhere along the way, Clara decided I was a problem. That morning, she stood across the kitchen from me, with her arms folded, her voice smooth but sharp enough to cut. "Helen, this arrangement just isn't working anymore. You're too set in your ways. The children are confused about who is in charge." I looked to Michael, expecting him to laugh it off, to say, "Don't be ridiculous, Mom belongs here." Instead, he stared at the floor. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat, rehearsed. "Maybe it's best if you find your own place, Mom." My chest tightened, as if someone had taken the air out of the room. "Where am I supposed to go?" I whispered. Clara gave a little shrug. "That's not our problem. You're a grown woman. You'll figure it out." 20 minutes later, Michael set my bags on the porch. For just a moment, I saw the boy he once was, the one who used to cry when I left for work, the one who promised he'd always take care of me. But then Clara stepped out behind him, and the softness disappeared from his eyes. The taxi pulled up as the first drops of rain started to fall. I climbed inside not because I felt strong, but because I had no choice. As we pulled away, I glanced back just once. Clara was already in the window of what used to be my room, moving furniture, erasing me. I had $687 in my purse, no job, and nowhere to go. What I didn't realize that day was that being discarded wasn't the end of my story. It was the painful beginning of the greatest transformation of my life. The cab dropped me off at a roadside motel just outside Charleston, the kind of place where the neon sign flickered all night and the smell of bleach clung to the sheets. $43 a night bought me a sagging mattress, a buzzing air conditioner that wheezed like it was on its last breath, and 4 cracked walls that echoed with loneliness. It wasn't much, but it was all I could afford. Every morning, I woke up and for a split second forgot where I was. I reached for the sound of children's laughter that wasn't there, for the comfort of a home that no longer existed. Then the truth hit me like a cold wave. I was 58 years old, widowed, broke, and unwanted. I tried to stretch every dollar. Canned soup, discount bread, peanut butter sandwiches. That was dinner most nights. I kept my clothes folded neatly in the suitcase because there wasn't a dresser worth using. At night, I stared at the ceiling, replaying the look on Michael's face when he turned me out. It wasn't anger that haunted me. It was indifference. The son I had raised through sickness and storms couldn't even meet my eyes as he locked me out of his life. But grief only gets you so far. Hunger and pride have a way of pushing you back onto your feet. I told myself I had survived worse. When Michael was small, there were winters we kept the heat low and huddled under 3 blankets. I had stretched a single paycheck to cover rent, daycare, and food. I reminded myself that I was the same woman, just older now. If I could do it then, I could do it again. So I walked. Every morning, I walked the 2 miles to the public library. Inside, the air was cool, and the silence gave me space to breathe. Most importantly, there was free internet. I sat at those public computers for hours, scrolling through job listings, typing up resumes on keyboards worn shiny by thousands of desperate fingers. Interview after interview, I heard the same polite rejection. You have a lot of experience, but we're looking for someone with more, energy. The word hung in the air like a slap. What they meant was, you're too old. I was about ready to give up when I stumbled into a small thrift shop tucked between a laundromat and a pawn shop. Balm up. The owner, Janet Miller, was a woman around my age with tired eyes and calloused hands. She asked what I could do. I told her bookkeeping, 20 years of it, from when I managed my late husband's small catering business. She tapped a stack of invoices on her counter and sighed. I can pay you $15 an hour, part-time. Interested? My throat tightened. It wasn't much, but it was something. When do I start? I asked. That first paycheck was only $240, but holding it in my hand felt like breathing again after nearly drowning. It was proof that I wasn't finished yet. What I didn't know then was that this shabby thrift shop and that tired woman would be the doorway to a future I couldn't even imagine. Janet's thrift shop wasn't glamorous. The roof leaked when it rained, the floorboards creaked underfoot, and the air always carried a faint smell of dust mixed with mothballs. But to me, it was a sanctuary. I kept the books tidy, balanced her messy invoices, and created a simple system that saved her hundreds of dollars within weeks. One afternoon, I watched Janet haul a scratched oak chair toward the dumpster out back. Its legs were wobbly, the seat torn, and the polish had long faded. "Why are you throwing that away?" I asked. "No one wants broken junk," she said, brushing her hands. "Takes up space. Better to toss it." Something inside me stirred. I had spent decades fixing things that other people said weren't worth saving, scrubbing burned pots until they shone, patching Michael's jeans so he could wear them another school year, even nursing bruised hearts when life got too heavy. Fixing was in my blood. "Would you mind if I took it?" I asked. She blinked at me. "You want this?" "Yes," I said simply. That night in my motel room, I dragged the chair onto a plastic sheet and set to work. I borrowed sandpaper from the hardware aisle at the dollar store, polished the wood with oil I found in the back of a cupboard, and stitched the torn seat using fabric from an old curtain. Hours slipped by. My hands ached, but with every stroke of sandpaper, I felt something I hadn't felt in months: purpose. By morning, the chair looked alive again. Not new, but dignified, like it remembered what it was meant to be. When I carried it back to the shop, Janet's jaw dropped. "This looks incredible. You did this in one night?" I shrugged, embarrassed but proud. "Just needed a little care." She ran her hand over the polished armrest, shaking her head. "Helen, people will pay for this. You could sell it right here." The thought felt impossible, but within a week, that same chair sold for $120. Janet pressed the bills into my hand. "You earned this," she said firmly. I stared at the money, stunned. That was nearly half my rent. Not from bookkeeping, not from scrubbing, but from breathing life into something others had abandoned. From then on, Janet set aside every broken table, scuffed dresser, and battered nightstand for me. My motel room turned into a workshop, cluttered with furniture in various stages of transformation. The staff laughed that it looked like a carpenter's garage. Then came the dresser. It was a heavy piece with chipped veneer and a missing drawer pull. I worked on it every evening after my shift, sanding until my fingers blistered, polishing until the wood gleamed like amber. When it sold for $200 at the shop, I felt something awaken inside me. This wasn't just survival. This was a gift. For the first time since Michael slammed that door, I didn't feel discarded. I felt powerful, and I had no idea that this hidden talent was about to change everything. Within 6 months, my motel room looked less like a place to sleep and more like a warehouse. Tables leaned against the wall, chairs crowded the corners, and scraps of sandpaper covered the floor. The motel clerk teased me once, asking if I was opening a black market furniture store. I just smiled, because in truth, the idea wasn't far-fetched. When my savings finally reached a modest cushion, I moved into a small studio apartment above a bakery downtown. The scent of fresh bread wafted through my windows every morning, and the space, though tiny, felt like freedom. For the first time in years, I had a door that only I controlled. No one could toss me out. I worked at the thrift shop by day and restored furniture by night. Word began to spread. Customers who bought one of my refinished pieces often returned asking, "Do you have anything else?" Others brought in their own damaged items, hoping I could work some magic. The truth was, I didn't just repair wood and fabric, I gave forgotten things another chance. And in the process, I was giving myself one too. One Saturday afternoon, a woman named Angela Brown came into the shop. She was in her early 60s, retired from running a consulting firm, with a sharp gaze that missed nothing. She bought a mahogany coffee table I had restored, and before leaving she asked, "Who did this work?" I raised my hand. "Just me." Her eyes narrowed with interest. "This is more than skill, this is vision. Have you ever thought of turning it into a business?" I laughed, shaking my head. "I barely have enough to cover rent. A business is out of reach." Angela smiled knowingly. That's what most people say before they realize the only thing standing between them and success is belief. We met for coffee the following week. She listened to my story, the betrayal, the motel, the thrift shop, and when I finished, she tapped her cup thoughtfully. "Helen, you're not just repairing furniture. You're showing people that what's thrown away still has value. That's not just work, that's a brand." The word struck me like a spark. A brand. I had never thought of myself that way. Angela guided me through the basics. How to apply for a small business grant, how to present a plan, how to put numbers into words that bankers respected. We brainstormed names, and one evening, while sanding the edge of a dresser, it came to me, Second Chance Furnishings, because that's exactly what it was. Not just second chances for the tables and chairs I brought back to life, but for me too. As I painted the name onto a scrap of wood and propped it in my window, a strange feeling washed over me. I realized for the first time that being thrown away wasn't the end. Sometimes it was the seed of something waiting to grow. And mine was just beginning to sprout. By the second year, my studio above the bakery had become too cramped. My little balcony overflowed with chairs waiting for polish. The stairwell was stacked with tables I couldn't move fast enough. And the bakery owner joked that his customers came for bread but stayed to admire my mini showroom. It was time to grow. With Angela's encouragement, I leased a small workshop on the edge of Charleston. A drafty brick building that smelled of sawdust and possibility. I hired 2 young apprentices, Marcus, a 19-year-old who had dropped out of school, and Lena, a single mother looking for steady work. Neither had experience, but both had the hunger I recognized in myself. "Every piece deserves a second chance," I told them on their first day, "and so do you." Word spread quickly. Real estate agents started calling, asking if I could restore furniture left behind in foreclosed homes. Estate sales brought me entire truckloads of battered armoires, cracked dressers, and chipped dining sets. What others saw as junk, I saw as stories waiting to be told again. The Charleston Gazette ran a feature titled, "From Motel Room to Master Restorer." I almost cried when I saw my photo in print, standing in front of a row of gleaming tables. Customers began pouring in, curious about the woman who could make old wood shine like new. Within 3 years, Second Chance Furnishings was pulling in over $1 million in revenue. My apprentices had become artisans in their own right, and I'd hired 3 more workers. We were no longer a novelty, we were a name. Yet even with the money flowing, I lived simply. My apartment was modest, my clothes practical. I still brewed my coffee in the same dented pot I'd carried from the motel. Some nights, when I sat alone at my kitchen table, I would whisper to myself, "You did this. You turned being thrown away into a foundation." But success wasn't just about profit. It was about dignity. I remembered every interview where I'd been told I was too old, every cold look Clara gave me when I dared to exist in her kitchen. Every moment Michael chose silence instead of standing up for me. Those memories no longer broke me. They fueled me. The irony wasn't lost on me. My own son had cast me aside like a useless relic, and here I was, building an empire out of what others discarded. Each polished chair, each gleaming dresser was proof that value never disappears. It only waits for the right hands. One evening, after finishing a particularly beautiful oak dining set, I stepped back and looked at it glowing under the workshop lights. My apprentices clapped, proud of our work. I smiled, not just at the furniture, but at the life I had built. I was no longer Helen, the woman abandoned at a motel. I was Helen Carter, founder of Second Chance Furnishings, proof that nothing and no one is ever truly worthless. And deep inside, I knew this was only the beginning. By the 6th year, my life looked nothing like the motel room I once called home. Second Chance Furnishings was thriving beyond anything I'd imagined. Designers from Atlanta and Charlotte were calling me for custom restorations. I had contracts with 3 real estate firms and a waiting list of clients eager to own something Helen Carter touched. The money was steady, more than steady. It was flowing. I had started investing in small rental properties and local shops, using the same philosophy that saved my business. Find what others overlook, nurture it, and let it grow. My net worth quietly climbed past $7 million. For the first time, I didn't just feel secure, I felt powerful. Angela, who had become not only my mentor, but also a dear friend, looked at me one afternoon over coffee and said, "Helen, you've built a kingdom. Now you need a castle." I laughed, but the idea took root. A week later, my realtor called. "The Whitmore estate just hit the market," she said, her voice buzzing with excitement. "It hasn't been for sale in 50 years. 12,000 square feet, colonial style, right on the Charleston waterfront." My breath caught. The Whitmore estate was the stuff of local legend. A mansion with sweeping porches, marble staircases, and a garden that overlooked the harbor. It was the kind of place Michael and Clara used to drive past on Sundays, pointing and dreaming aloud about someday. I toured it that evening. The foyer alone took my breath away. Crystal chandeliers dripping with light, walls paneled in mahogany that gleamed under my fingertips. The library had floor-to-ceiling shelves begging to be filled, and the conservatory was a greenhouse bigger than my entire workshop. But it was the master bedroom that sealed my decision. From the balcony, I could see the city stretched out below me, the skyline glowing in the distance. Somewhere across town, Michael and Clara lived in their modest suburban home, struggling with a mortgage they could barely afford. And here I stood, looking down on the very world that once looked down on me. The asking price was $4.2 million. I didn't flinch. "Cash offer," I told the realtor. 3.9. "Close in 2 weeks." Her eyes widened. "Helen, are you sure?" I smiled. "I've never been more sure." 2 weeks later, I stood in the grand foyer, keys in hand, the marble floor gleaming at my feet. 6 years earlier, I'd been homeless with less than $700 to my name. Now, I owned the most prestigious house in Charleston. That night, I sat on the balcony with a glass of wine, watching the sun sink into the harbor. The breeze carried the faint sound of church bells from downtown. And for the first time in years, I felt something settle inside me. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was exactly where I belonged. The Whitmore estate had been mine for less than 48 hours when the doorbell rang. It was a Saturday morning, the sun casting golden light through the tall windows of my new kitchen. I was still learning where the mugs were kept when I heard the chime echo across the marble foyer. I glanced at the security screen, and my heart skipped. There they were, Michael, Clara, and 2 teenagers I barely recognized. Emma, now 16, stood awkwardly with her arms crossed. Lucas, 14, shifted from foot to foot, staring at the grand porch columns. Clara was polished as ever in her designer blazer, her lips fixed in a smile I knew too well. Michael looked older, grayer, his khakis rumpled, like he had thrown them on in a hurry. I took my time walking to the door. 6 years of silence. And they showed up the very day the newspaper printed the headline, "Historic Whitmore Estate, sold to local entrepreneur." The timing was almost laughable. "Well, well," I said, opening the door, but leaving the screen locked. "Michael, Clara, children I barely know, to what do I owe this surprise?" Michael cleared his throat. "Mom, we came to congratulate you on the house." "How thoughtful," I replied evenly. "Consider congratulations received." Clara stepped forward, her smile too bright. "Helen, we know things ended badly years ago, but we've had time to reflect. We realize we handled it wrong." "Handled it wrong?" I repeated slowly. "Is that what you call throwing your widowed mother out with 2 suitcases and $700 to her name?" Emma shifted uncomfortably. "Grandma, I don't really remember you, but Mom said you used to make the best cookies." Her innocent words pierced me deeper than Clara's rehearsed apology. She was right. She barely remembered me. They had stolen 6 years of birthdays, school plays, and bedtime stories. Michael's voice wavered. "Please, Mom, can we come in? We just want to talk." I let the silence stretch until Clara's smile faltered. Then I stepped aside. "Very well. Let's talk." They entered, their eyes widening as they took in the chandeliers, the sweeping staircase, the silk wallpaper. Lucas let out a low whistle. "This place is amazing." Clara's gaze darted around the living room, like a calculator ticking off square footage and property values. "Certainly spacious," she said. "Much too big for one person." I settled into a velvet armchair, folding my hands in my lap. "Ah, there it is. The real reason you're here." Michael sat stiffly on the sofa. "We've had difficulties. I lost my job. The mortgage is behind. Emma needs college applications covered. We thought, maybe, you thought you could move in." I finished for him. The room fell silent. Only the clock on the mantel ticked, counting every second of their shame. For the first time in years, I wasn't the discarded one. I was the one with the power, and I intended to use it. The silence after my words was heavy. Michael shifted on the sofa, his eyes darting anywhere but mine. Clara's mask slipped at last. Her smile hardened into a sharp edge. "Fine," she snapped. "Yes, we need help. We thought you could open your home. We're family, Helen." I leaned forward, my voice calm but cutting. "Family? Is that what you called it when you locked me out in the rain with 2 suitcases? When you told me figuring out my life wasn't your problem?" Emma's head shot up. "Wait, what?" I looked at her and Lucas. "Your parents never told you." 6 years ago, I lived with them after your grandfather died. I cooked for you, cared for you, gave them every penny I had. And then one morning they decided I was too inconvenient. They put my bags on the porch and told me to go." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Dad, you said she moved to Florida. You said she didn't want to see us anymore." Michael's face went pale. Lucas turned to Clara, his voice rising. "You lied. You both lied." Clara's tone sharpened. "We did what we had to do." She was undermining us. "Undermining you?" I said softly. "By teaching your children to say please and thank you by making them breakfast?" Emma stood up, trembling with anger. "You stole my grandmother from me. 6 years gone." Michael buried his face in his hands. Clara glared at him. "Don't look at me like that. You agreed, remember?" The cracks in their perfect facade spread wide. For once, the truth had nowhere to hide. I rose from my chair and crossed to the window, gazing out over the manicured lawn. "You see this house, this business, this life? I built it alone. Every contract, every dollar, every polished table. It came from the strength you tried to convince me I didn't have. You discarded me. And though that was your mistake." I turned back, my voice steady. "Michael and Clara, you are not welcome to live here. But Emma and Lucas, my door is open to you anytime. You deserve to know your grandmother. You deserve the truth." Emma rushed to hug me. Lucas followed, his arms tight around my waist. "We want to come back, Grandma. We want to know everything." Tears burned my eyes as I held them close. Then you will. We have years to make up for. Michael and Clara left in silence, their children's eyes still wet with betrayal. I watched them drive away, knowing the balance of power had shifted forever. That evening, I sat on my balcony, the Charleston harbor glowing in the dusk. A journal lay open on my lap. I wrote the words that had carried me from a motel room to a mansion. Being discarded does not make you worthless. Sometimes it frees you to discover your true value. And the best revenge is not anger, it is living well. For the first time in a long time, I felt completely at peace.